Why don't you take a break? Robert's kind words caught me off guard, bringing tears to my eyes. When was the last time anyone had shown genuine concern for me? His words were a wake-up call. I needed to escape this toxic in-law nightmare. It was time for payback. My name is Sarah. I'm 38 years old, and I'm now happily living in a shared house. Some people raise their eyebrows when they hear that. I could never imagine living with strangers, they say, but after my divorce, I found living alone unbearable. Sharing a house with strangers? Surprisingly, it brought me comfort. There are worse families out there, believe me, I know. It all started 10 years ago when my husband, Ken, and I began our newlywed life in a cozy apartment. Ken had an unmarried sister, Nancy, and their mother, Amelia, who often dropped by uninvited. Ken, you got married before me, huh? Nancy would tease, her tone laced with bitterness. Amelia, ever the instigator, added fuel to the fire with her passive-aggressive comments. Nancy tried to brush it off, saying things like, "Marriage isn't everything." She tried to sound strong, but her frustration was obvious. Her words had merit, but her actions betrayed her. Nancy bought wedding magazines every month, despite having no immediate plans to marry. She wanted it more than anyone. For 3 years, she dated a man long distance, but their relationship showed no signs of moving forward. "Nancy, you're almost 30, Amelia would say, her voice dripping with judgment. "If you keep dragging your feet, you won't have kids or find someone to marry." Amelia's relentless nagging made Nancy visibly agitated. It became an unspoken rule not to mention marriage around her, but Amelia ignored this, always managing to push Nancy's buttons. To make matters worse, Amelia constantly compared Nancy to me. "Girls like Sarah, who can't remember anything at work and rely on others, are more popular with men," Amelia said with a smirk. "Men don't like strong, assertive women like me." It was exhausting. Each time Nancy went on her tirade about her independence being superior, I had to reassure her. "No, no, women like you are admired by men," I'd say, not to flatter her but to keep the peace. Still, she was emotional and difficult to deal with. Then one day, Amelia dropped a bombshell. "Why don't we all live together?" She said it casually during one of her unannounced visits, leaving Ken, Nancy, and me in stunned silence. "Why?" Ken asked, visibly annoyed. "We see each other all the time anyway. It would be easier to manage one household instead of two," Amelia replied. "Don't you think so, Sarah?" Ken glanced at me, silently pleading for me to refuse. Meanwhile, Amelia stared expectantly, fully anticipating my agreement. "Well, we're still newlyweds," I stammered. "We'd like some more time to ourselves." Amelia laughed, her tone mocking. "A whole year, and you still feel like newlyweds? Must be nice, huh, Nancy? Aren't you jealous?" Nancy's face reddened, but Amelia continued. "I guess Nancy will just have to take care of me in my old age." Nancy's expression darkened. Her tone was icy. "No, since Ken's married, it's his wife's responsibility to take care of you." "Absolutely not," I blurted out, nodding in agreement with Ken's nervous reply. "Having a man in the house would make Mom feel safer." Nancy added smugly, "Ken and Sarah should take her in. I'm out most of the time for work." Ken protested. Amelia's presence was suffocating, and the thought of living with her was unbearable. Yet Nancy seized the moment, pushing me into a corner. "I bet Sarah doesn't want to live with Mom because they're strangers. She's your Amelia, after all. Who wouldn't find that annoying?" I looked to Ken for support, but he avoided my gaze. I felt abandoned, left to fend for myself. Nancy, clearly enjoying the chaos, smirked. "Since Ken and Sarah don't want to, they should be the ones to live with Mom." Her delight at my misery was evident. "I thought I was good to you, but I guess you're just an ungrateful daughter-in-law," Amelia snapped one day. From that moment, our already strained relationship deteriorated even further. One afternoon, she showed up unannounced and declared, "I'm hosting a party, and I need you to come up with some dishes for me to serve." "A party? Serving dishes?" I asked, confused. "You mean you want me to cook for this party?" "Of course, why would I do that? That doesn't make any sense." "Wait, what?" I asked, incredulous. "You'll make the food, and I'll tell everyone I cooked it." "Oh, and we'll host the party here at your house," Amelia explained nonchalantly. "Wait, what? Do you have a problem with that?" she asked, her tone daring me to challenge her. "No, no problem at all," I muttered, swallowing my frustration. "Really, Ken, can't you at least say something?" I whispered to my husband later, but he just shrugged. A week later, the party happened. Amelia invited 5 of her friends to our house and bragged the entire time. She told them she had reluctantly moved in with us because we insisted. She claimed we were overly protective and couldn't bear to see her live alone. Her friends ate it up, praising her close family and marveling at her amazing cooking, all dishes I had spent hours preparing. The whole thing was a charade, a performance so Amelia could show off. Thankfully, there was no second party. Her friends likely humored her the first time out of politeness, but the event emboldened Amelia and Nancy. They began staying over more frequently until it felt like they had moved in entirely. Ken would complain to me in private, but he never confronted them. I felt trapped and isolated. This wasn't the life I imagined when I got married. One day, Nancy came home from work with a radiant smile. "Big news," she announced. "I'm getting married." "Wow, congratulations," I replied, masking my surprise. Nancy, who had been so obsessed with marriage, was finally getting her wish. Her joy was palpable, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Relief washed over me. Finally, Nancy would move out, or so I thought. "We're having a little get-together to introduce my fiancé," she continued. "Wait, you mean here?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Of course, Sarah, could you prepare the food for the party?" Here we go again, I thought, my heart sinking. "Wouldn't it make more sense for you to cook since it's your fiancé?" "Oh, come on, you know I can't cook," Nancy said with a laugh. And that was the crux of it. Nancy, who had lived at home her entire life, had never bothered to learn even the basics. Suddenly, everything clicked. Amelia's eagerness to move in with us wasn't just about meddling, it was exhaustion. She had spent years doing everything for Nancy and was ready to offload the burden. I watched, disheartened, as Nancy and Ken, both hopeless in the kitchen, planned the menu. Ordering food would have been simpler, but I knew the expense would fall on us. Ken would grumble later, but never to their faces. Divorce crossed my mind more and more, but with no savings and nowhere to go, I felt stuck. When the day of the party arrived, Nancy's fiancé, Robert, seemed like a breath of fresh air. "Wow, this looks amazing," he said, complimenting the food Nancy was pretending to have made. "I've never had your cooking before," he added, smiling warmly at her. "Well, we've been in a long-distance relationship, so there weren't many chances," Nancy replied, playing the part perfectly. Robert was polite, attentive, and far too good for her. He even helped Amelia and made an effort to talk to me. If only Ken could learn a thing or two, I thought bitterly. The evening went smoothly, with everyone praising the food. "I'm so relieved it's over," I thought, until Nancy's smug voice interrupted my peace. "So, Sarah, what are you going to do when I move out? I'm sure you'll miss me." "Not one bit," I silently prayed. Shortly after the wedding, Nancy moved out. I hoped things would improve, but Amelia only became more demanding. "Sarah, take me out," she barked one Saturday morning while Ken lay in bed. "I'm tired," Ken mumbled. "Leave me alone." "You always say that," she snapped. Then, turning to me, "Sarah, take me out." Of course, it had fallen to me again. "I'm not feeling well today," I tried to protest. "I don't care," she shot back. "Family should be fair. If your health is prioritized, my desire to go out should be respected too." I stared at her, dumbfounded. Fair? The irony was almost laughable. "I'm really not feeling well. I'm nauseous and have a headache," I said weakly. "It's just a cold. Rest, and you'll be fine," Amelia replied dismissively. "Should I just sleep, then? Who's going to do the chores?" I asked, frustrated. "You talk about fairness, but you never consider doing your part," I muttered. "You're just weak, don't exaggerate," she snapped. I've never heard of a cold being cured by whining about it. Her indifference only made me feel worse, so I decided to ignore her. "Ken," she called out, her voice shrill, "your wife is useless. She's making me upset. And it's annoying. Why don't you handle her? You're her son," I retorted, but it fell on deaf ears. For daring to argue, I found myself locked outside for 30 minutes. After walking aimlessly, I returned to find Ken acting as if nothing had happened. "What's your problem?" he asked, but I didn't have the energy to reply. My condition worsened, and I began running fevers daily. Exhausted, I stopped fighting back. About a month after Nancy moved out, Amelia suggested, since we didn't have a wedding celebration for Nancy, let's celebrate my birthday together as a family. Everyone seemed excited, planning the menu and activities. "I'm sorry, but I'd like to skip the celebration. I'm not feeling well," I said hesitantly. "You've been saying that forever," Amelia scoffed. "You're lying." "I'm not lying," I protested. "The doctor couldn't find anything, so you must be faking it," she declared. "Since you're so fine, You can handle all the chores during the party. Despite my protests, I ended up not only attending but also preparing everything. During the party, Amelia's guests complimented her. "Thanks for having us. I'm looking forward to Sarah's cooking," one of them said cheerfully. "You're welcome," Amelia replied with a smug smile. "Sarah, aren't you going to eat?" one of the guests asked. "I'm fine, thank you," I said, trying to mask my exhaustion. "Don't be silly, come sit with us. It's a family event," they insisted. "No, really, I'm okay," I murmured, forcing a smile. I couldn't relax anymore. I was too used to doing all the work. But then, one of the guests, Robert, noticed my distress. His genuine concern overwhelmed me, and tears started to flow. "Sarah, what's wrong?" he asked softly. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "It's just, no one has been this kind to me in a long time. Let's get some fresh air," he suggested, leading me outside. "Thank you," I said, finally feeling seen. "Why don't you tell me what's really going on?" he prompted gently. "I don't even know where to start," I admitted, my voice trembling. Before I knew it, I was telling him everything: the neglect, the manipulation, the constant exhaustion. His expression grew stern. "This is unacceptable," he declared and marched back inside. "What kind of house is this? How can you all sit here drinking while Sarah is suffering?" he demanded. The room fell silent. "What did you tell him, Sarah?" Nancy hissed. "Just the truth," I replied firmly. "Nancy, you've been having Sarah cook all your food, haven't you?" Robert asked, his voice full of accusation. "She wanted to," Nancy stammered, but her face betrayed her guilt. "You've been lying to me this whole time." "No, and Ken," Robert continued. "How can you stand by and let your wife be treated this way?" "That's none of your business," Ken retorted, his tone defensive. "It is now," Robert said coldly. "I've decided to divorce Nancy." The room erupted into chaos. "Wait, what? Why?" Nancy shrieked. "You lied to me, that's all you care about? I'm done." Nancy turned to Amelia, panicked. "What about me? Who's going to take care of Mom?" "Not me," Robert said firmly. Nancy looked desperate. "Sarah, you can't be serious about divorce." "I'm dead serious," I snapped, my voice rising for the first time. "I'm done being treated like a servant. Even maids get paid, I don't get a cent. If this family were subject to labor laws, you'd all be in big trouble." "This is ridiculous," Amelia protested. "Is it?" I countered. "You've woken me in the middle of the night to help you look for things, yelled at me for breakfast being late, ignored my feelings, and imposed your wishes on me. This house has no respect for me. Even prisons offer more rights than this place." Ken muttered something under his breath, clearly uncomfortable. "Who cares who's to blame? I can't stay in this toxic family anymore," I declared. "I want a divorce." The double divorce announcement marked the end of an era. Afterward, I kept the house, while Ken moved back in with his parents. Life after the divorce wasn't easy, but I began to heal. Therapy revealed I had a stress-induced mental illness, and I managed to claim damages for emotional distress. Nancy and Robert divorced as well, leaving Nancy to move back in with Amelia and Ken. The three of them struggled, eventually losing their home and moving together to start over. As for me, I found peace. I became a preschool teacher, a dream I had abandoned long ago. Now, I live in a shared house with other women and rescue cats, surrounded by love and laughter. I've built a new life for myself. Happiness isn't tied to marriage or children, and I'm living proof of that.